Hi, my name is Carrie and this is Carrie Louise Reads. So today I'm very quickly going to go through everything I read between January and the end of March. I would usually do recent reads videos to talk about the books I've been reading, but I just thought rather than trying to remember loads of detail about books that I read 3 months ago, I'm just going to blitz through. So I'm very quickly going to tell you the book, the rating, and if I can remember that much about it, then I'll tell you something about it. A lot of these books are borrowed from the library, so I will be putting pictures up of them. Some of them I have here and I'll hold them up, but some of them are the other side of the room and I can't be bothered to go and get them, so they'll have pictures too. Never mind. So without further ado, let's just race through these. So the first book I finished was The Dome of Heaven by Lavinia Byrne. This was a collection of readings and prayers for Advent, which started at the end of November and carried through right to the end of Epiphany, which is kind of the end of the first week of January. I gave this 4 stars. I found it really helped me to reflect on what Advent is about and I really enjoyed it. So that was that one. The second book that I finished was Iron Widow by Ziran J. Zhao, and I'm probably saying that wrong because I can't remember how to pronounce it properly, so apologies. I also gave that one 4 stars. That was our Space Sirens pick for January. I'll link our live show for that down in the description box so you can go and check out what we thought of it. I really enjoyed it. Lots of good angry feminism. There were aspects that could have been better, but definitely want to carry on with the series, and yeah, really enjoyed it. The third book that I finished was Conversations on Love by Natasha Lund. This was an e-arc I had from NetGalley for review. There will be a review coming for it at some point. Who knows when, with the way my life is at the moment. At some point that will come. I gave that 4.5 stars. It was just one of those books that I picked up at the time I really needed it. I was reflecting a lot about romance and relationships, and this was really good at exploring different kinds of love. Very brief review here to say I really enjoyed it. So basically the premise is Natasha Lund interviews different people about their experiences of different forms of love. So that is romantic relationships, but also sibling relationships, friend relationships, finding love, losing love, recovering from the loss of loved ones, all of these really important issues. And actually it's a really timely book I think would benefit a lot of people to read at the moment, particularly if you've experienced loss during the last couple of years. So that was Conversations on Love by Natasha Lund. Do highly recommend it. We'll have a review coming for it at some point. The next book I finished was called On Being a Priest Today by Christopher Cocksworth and Rosalind Brown. This was one that had been recommended to me a while back relating to my training to become a priest, and I finally got around to picking it up, read it over in the space of a couple of months. I really enjoyed it, ended up giving it 5 stars. It really helped me to reflect a lot about what it means to be a priest. I should say my laptop is here, which is why I keep looking down. The next book that I finished was called Instructions for Dancing by Nicola Yoon. I gave this one 4 stars. This was kind of a contemporary romance, but it was a bit bittersweet. Actually paired really well with Conversations on Love, exploring kind of themes of love and loss, and I thought it was really well handled. It made me quite emotional actually, especially towards the end, and I thought it was really cleverly done. It was kind of a slightly self-aware romance novel. The protagonist, whose name I can't remember, had been a big lover of romance fiction, but due to the breakdown of her parents' marriage, she'd given up hope on romance. So there were kind of lots of references like, oh, if this was a romance novel, then X, Y, and Z. And it was quite funny. So I really enjoyed that, gave it 4 stars. The next book that I finished was The Bloodprint by Osma Zehnat Khan. I gave this one 2.5 stars. I was really enjoying it most of the way through, but towards the end there was a really problematic trope, which was one of the bad guy figures was a person with albinism, and that's just a trope that needs to go away and die. So that was very disappointing. There were other things that, like, the more I reflect on it, the less I liked about the book. There was some colorism. There was definitely a not like other girls trope to it, which is a trope that I do not like. Yeah, really mixed feelings about that one. I'd had really high hopes and it just wasn't as good as I wanted it to be. So I haven't decided yet if I'm going to carry on with the series. I have the second one out from the library, but I haven't got around to picking it up yet. And I may just take it back unread because I'm not sure that I care enough about the characters to carry on with all the issues. Anyway, so I gave that one 2.5 stars. The next book that I finished was The Queens of Innis Lear by Tessa Gratton. I gave this one 5 stars. I really loved it. It was probably my favourite book in January. This is a fantasy retelling of King Lear by Shakespeare. I'm a massive Shakespeare fan, so good retellings or things that reference Shakespeare I really enjoy, and this one really hit the right notes for me. I really enjoyed what Tessa Gratton did with the story, what they did with the characters, and how they reinterpreted it as a fantasy novel, and I thought it was really, really excellent. So I gave it 5 stars. The next book that I finished, I actually can hold up. This is A Rise to Power by Ruth Durrant. This is a retelling of the story of King David from the Bible, which is the subject of my research I'm doing for my PhD. I'm mainly focusing on how the story is retold in romance novels. This is just kind of more straightforward historical retelling. It wasn't great. I gave it 2.5 stars. It wasn't brilliantly written, and some of the interpretive choices were interesting, so yeah, I gave it 2.5 stars. The next thing that I finished was 10 Things I Hate About Pinkie by Sundial Manon. This was the final book in the Dimple and Rishi verse. I really, really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. This had my favourite fake dating trope. I do love a fake dating trope. All the books in the series really sweet and really enjoyed them all. I think the second one probably was my favourite. There's something about Sweetie, but I really did enjoy this one too. I like the way it explored the different family relationships and very much enjoyed it. And I gave it 4 stars. And the next book that I finished was The Snowball by Bridget Brophy. I gave this 3.5 stars. It was quite interesting. It was kind of a romance. It takes place at a masked ball. I don't really remember a lot about it. I thought the writing style was really beautiful and I would read more by Bridget Brophy, but it was not the most memorable thing. So anyway, 3.5 stars. The next book that I finished was called The Book of Memory by Petina. This I read for Read Around the World. The author is from Zimbabwe and that's where the book is set as well. This was really good. I gave it 4.5 stars. It followed Memory, who was a black woman with albinism who is in prison for murdering her stepfather, or adoptive father, I guess. So she's retelling her life story, how she ended up where she did, and it was really powerful, really moving and quite poignant, and yeah, very emotional. So yeah, very much enjoyed that one. And then the final book that I finished in January was Romancing God by Lynn S. Neal. This is kind of an analysis of inspirational romance fiction, the people who read it, why they read it, kind of some of the tropes that occur in it. So I read this one for research and I found it really helpful, so I gave it 4 stars. So that was all the books I read in January. Now on to February. The next book that I finished was called And Now for My 43rd Point by Nick and Claire Page. I gave this one 3.5 stars. My dad lent this to me. I had to do a module at college on preaching and like the point of a sermon, and that's what this book was about, so it was quite helpful for that. I didn't agree with everything they said, but some of it was quite useful, quite funny in places as well. The next book that I finished was The Loveliest Chocolate Shop in Paris by Jenny Colgan. I picked this one up in a charity and a 3 for £1 deal, I don't know if you can see that, and actually read it quite quickly because I was just in the mood for some cheesy contemporary romance. Ended up really enjoying it and have actually sought out a few more books by Jenny Colgan from the library because I quite liked her writing style. So I gave this one 3.5 stars. Like, it's not world-breaking, it's a fairly standard contemporary romance, but I thought it was quite sweet. I liked the main character. Anna, the main character, had an accident at work and she's been left with kind of a minor disability, but I started reading this fairly soon after I had my diagnosis, which if you've seen my first quarter wrap up, I go into a little bit about my diagnosis of a chronic illness. So reading this fairly soon after that was just really helpful and uplifting for me. It's very sweet and I quite enjoyed it. The next book that I finished was The Big Four by Agatha Christie. This is it's in the Poirot series. I think it's like the 5th or 6th. It's the 5th book in the Poirot series. It's my least favourite so far. I gave it 3 stars. It wasn't really a straight mystery. It's kind of the Big Four is this international criminal gang that Poirot is trying to bring down. So it was a bit more of an adventure book than a mystery book. And I just don't feel like that works with Poirot, but that's just my opinion. So I gave it 3 stars. I didn't love it, but I never really hate Agatha Christie, so yeah. The next book that I finished was Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. I gave this one 4 stars. Thought it was really clever. I really liked the setting and the characterization and kind of the themes of identity and family and the protagonist whose name I can't remember and how he's trying to get his family to accept him. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting, really fun, very exciting, fast-paced and really enjoyable. so I gave it 4 stars. I then read From Twinkle with Love by Sundial Manon. So this is a standalone book. I gave it 3.5 stars. I didn't enjoy it quite as much as the Dimple and Rishiverse books. Mainly kind of the girl hate trope bothered me. I didn't love all of the plot twists, all of the decisions that Twinkle, the protagonist, made, but in general it was again another sweet book, so I gave it 3.5 stars. I then read Hijab and Red Lipstick by Yusra Imran. I gave this one 2.5 stars. That's not necessarily the fault of the book. I was expecting a contemporary romance. It was a contemporary coming of age. It was much darker, a lot more disturbing content. And so it was just really not what I'd been expecting or needing at the time. It was very interesting. It wasn't brilliantly written, but it was her debut, so I kind of understand that, and like it raised some really important issues, and I think was semi-autobiographical based on the author's own experiences and also experiences of her friends. There were some really good aspects to this book, but it just wasn't what I was expecting. I then read Ancillary Justice by Leckie. This was a reread for me. This was our Space Arians book for February. I will link our live show in the description box as well for you. I mean, I gave it 5 stars. I loved it the first time. I loved it again this time. It's sometimes a bit, I could be holding it up. It's sometimes a bit worrying picking up books that you've really enjoyed again in case they don't live up, but this one really did live up to my memory, and I'm hopefully gonna reread the rest of the series as well this year. And then finally in February I read In Search of Our Mother's Gardens by Alice Walker. This was a collection of essays by her. I read The Colour Purple a long time ago but hadn't read anything else by her, so I saw this in the college library and picked it up. Really thoroughly enjoyed it, gave it 5 stars. Probably my favourite thing I read in February, apart from maybe Ancillary Justice, which doesn't feel like it counts because it was a reread, but very much enjoyed it. So that was everything that I read in February. So on to March. I DNF'd one book in March. I'm going to get that one out of the way first. I don't remember when I picked it up. So that was A Bollywood Affair by Sonali Dev. I managed 3 chapters maybe. So I picked this up because it was Bollywood inspired romance and I thought that sounded really fun. However, the initial setup of the premise felt a little bit far-fetched and I didn't like the male protagonist very much from what I saw of him. And then in the 3rd chapter there was just a blatant disregard for basic first aid, which really wound me up, and I decided to DNF it. I decided I was too angry to carry on. I've since heard from another booktuber, Cara from Wild Book Garden. She had a video about books that she's DNF'd recently, and I mentioned that I DNF'd this in the comments, and she said she hated it when she'd read it. So I think it was the right decision to give up on it. So on to the things I did finish in March. I read 1922 by Nick Rennison. This was an e-arc I had from NetGalley for a review, so there will be a review coming for it at some point. I don't know when. I gave this 4 stars. This was really fun. It was about kind of key events that happened throughout the year of 1922, as it's 100 years since that year, and it was broken down month by month, so he brought out some of the key things that happened in each month. There were quite a lot of things that I hadn't realised happened in that year or hadn't ever heard of at all. It was really, really interesting and I really enjoyed it, so a review for that coming at some point. I then read Relatable by Vicky Walker. This was a Christmas present from my parents. Thank you very much, Mum and Dad. As you can see, I've got loads of tabs. I kind of wanted to read this because of how it links into my research. It's looking at how Christians understand love and relationships, and lots of really useful things. I used it for an assignment as well. I was writing an assignment on theology of marriage. I picked that topic because it tied into my research. This book was really helpful for both that assignment and for my ongoing research, so I'll probably revisit it lots in the coming year. So I gave that one 5 stars and found it really, really helpful, really enjoyed it. Then I read On Relationships, which is an anthology published by 3 of Cups Press. I gave this one 3.5 stars. I mostly really enjoyed it. I think there were just 1 or 2 short stories in it that I really didn't enjoy. So I haven't decided yet if I'm going to keep it. I may do, just because there was one story in particular which was called Firm Ground by Kazim Mohammed, which made me squee. And that story on its own would have been 5 stars, and there were quite a few others that I really did enjoy. There were just a couple that I really did not enjoy. I've enjoyed most of the stuff I read from 3 of Cups Press, and they're an indie publisher definitely to keep a lookout for. Then I read The Water Dancer by Ta-Nehisi Coates, which I gave 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really well written. It was kind of magical realism in historical setting. So the protagonist here in Walker has been raised as a slave in a plantation in Virginia, but he's actually the son of the master and his mother was a slave. There's kind of this rumour about this ability to travel via water, to use water as their conduit to travel further. It's made really clear in the book. I thought it was really, really cleverly done. I thought it explored a lot of the issues around the topic of slavery really, really well, and kind of insights into racism and that sort of thing. So very much enjoyed that one. Gave it 5 stars. I then finished First Comes Love by Tom Rasmussen. This was a non-fiction book I picked up for my assignment on the theology of marriage. I wanted to have a perspective from someone outside the church. So Tom Rasmussen is non-binary, queer, and so I was really interested in how they approach the topic of marriage. I found most of this book really interesting, really helpful, but in the end I gave it 2.5 stars because just some unnecessary detail about the author's sex life that was there for shock value and was not really necessary to make the points they were making kind of let it down a little bit for me. I understand why they did it, but yeah, just made me not enjoy it quite as much. Then I finished the No Need to Diet book by Pixie Turner. I talked about this as well in my quarter stats wrap up as being my favourite book I read in March. Really helped me with my relationship to food and my body, helped me to reflect a lot on how I respond to my body and what it needs, and just really actually was quite life-changing for me without wishing to make too much of a big deal over it. Very, very much enjoyed that and found it really helpful, so I gave it 5 stars. I then finished Borderline by Michelle Baker. This was our Space Sirens pick for March. I will leave the live show in the description again for you. I gave this one 4.5 stars. This was another book that came along at a really good time for me. So the protagonist has borderline personality disorder and is an amputee. She lost her legs after a failed suicide attempt. Lots of content warnings, and actually for all of these books I will link to the Book Trigger Warnings website for all of the books that are on that site, so you can check out if the books are safe for you to read. So although my disability and my mental illness are not the same as Millie's, the characters, it was really empowering for me to read this. And like, there's this one particular quote that I always talk about when I'm talking about this book that just hit me right in the feels because it really resonated with my experience. There was a lot of this book that resonated with my experience of kind of coming to terms with having a disability. But the bit that really hit me was, so it's urban fantasy, I should say. Millie was previously a rising star in the film industry and has now become involved with a group called the Arcadia Project, who police the interactions of the Fae world and the human world. There's a lot of Fae involvement in Hollywood. So they're pursuing a Fae person who has gone AWOL, and they keep finding these drawings, and because he's Fae, when you look at the drawing that he's drawn, you experience his emotion. And at one point Millie finds this picture drawn of herself, and there's a line in it that says, "She stood with the careful straightness of someone who took pain for granted." And that just really hit me. And I just felt really seen reading this book, even though, as I say, my mental illness and my disability are not the same as Millie's. I still found it really encouraging and empowering. So I gave that one 4.5 stars. And then actually the next book that I finished, for similar reasons, found really resonated a lot with me, which was The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. And this I gave 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. Olive, the protagonist, is coded as demisexual. It's not anywhere like obviously stated, but I am demisexual, and oh my goodness, did I felt seen by reading this book, because so much of what Olive experiences of like being a bit inept at relationships and not really being aware of other people's interest in her, and just kind of general awkwardness around attraction and sex and stuff. Yeah, just a lot of that felt really relatable to me. It lost a star because the sex scene was super awkward, and I thought it was just me, as someone on the A spectrum who is somewhat sex repulsed. I thought it was just me that found it awkward, but actually looking at some reviews, like quite a lot of people that really enjoyed this book, even found the sex scene awkward without being on the ace spectrums. But yeah, there was a lot that I really enjoyed about this book. I understand why it's getting all the hype it's getting, and it was just really validating for me to see a demisexual protagonist. So very much enjoyed that, gave it 4 stars. And then the final book that I am going to talk about today, the final book that I finished in March, was Revenant Gun by Yoon Ha Lee, which is the final book in the Machineries of Empire series. I gave this one 4.5 stars. I didn't quite enjoy it as much as the first 2 books, but I did still really enjoy it. I think maybe if when I reread this series, I'll read them closer together and will make sure I'm fully engaging my brain, because I was a bit foggy when I was reading this, and so maybe lost some of the nuance that I'd seen in the earlier books, because I was more awake and aware when reading them. But very much enjoyed it. Gave it 4.5 stars. Really, really loved it. Really loved the series. Will read anything by Yoon Ha Lee. Really love his writing. So very much looking forward to reading more stuff from him. So that was a whistle-stop tour of everything I read in the first 3 months of this year. I covered 30 books and I'm just over 30 minutes of footage, so that's pretty good. That's about a minute per book. It may be a bit shorter when I edit it, but never mind. So let me know if you've read any of these many books and what you thought of them. Let me know some of what you've been reading recently. So have a chat to me down in the comments, or if you just want to let me know that you've been here, leave me a heart emoji, because I've read quite a lot of romance at the start of this year, and actually several of them are books that I've focused on. So yeah, leave me a heart emoji in the comments if you just want to let me know that you've been here. You can also like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you haven't already, and you can also follow me on social media. All that information will be listed for you in the description box below. But that's it for today, so thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye!